We brine pretty much all of our pork and all of our poultry. It gives us an opportunity to denature proteins, to soften the meat, and to impart more flavor into the product. You can think of a piece of meat as a sponge. It's a porous membrane that will allow water or liquid to pass through it. So something like a 12 or a 16-hour brine, a lot of garlic, thyme, coriander, aromatics, lemon, lime, orange, apple juice, apple cider, anything you want your end product to taste like, that's what you want to include in your brine. As far as the ratio, this should be something like a half a cup to 4 quarts of liquid, but when you taste your salt water, that's your base. It should taste like the ocean, very salty. And typically hot water out of your tap is hot enough that when you put your salt in, you can whisk it and it'll liquefy. So you only have to have your water hot enough to actually liquefy the salt. Taste it, very salty brine solution, and you go with your product. This is 16 hours later. I put a paper towel on top of the product to keep the brining liquid all the way around. You can also put a weight or something on your product if it's trying to float to hold it down. You want it to be fully submerged in the brine, but that paper towel keeps the top of it moist in your brine. So we have 16 hours later, pull them out of the brine. There's a lot of marbling, there's a lot of muscle tissue, there's a lot of fat here. Anytime that we have a fat cap that we can put some hatch marks on prior to going into a pan to sear it, I tend to do so. Light strokes all the way across the top, both directions. This will help the fat render out. Okay, I'm gonna show you 2 different looks at sous vide cookery. I'm gonna cut this in half just so you can get 2 different techniques, but I would keep this whole and go one route or the other. I'm gonna pre-sear one and load it into a bag, and the other one I'm just gonna season. We're gonna put it into a Ziploc bag, get it into the sous vide cooker 1.5 hours. I have mine set to 138 degrees. Because it's out of a brine, it already has a good salinity to it, so I'm just touching the outside very lightly. The cracked black pepper, I'm gonna go a little heavier. You can do coriander if you want. Any seasoning that you like. I'm keeping this very simple because we're going to arrosier, which is a technique that includes basting with aromatics. That's gonna give this amazing flavor. And I do this prior to going into a sous vide bag so that all this caramelization can then be reabsorbed as it cooks on sous vide. Much like a microwave that is readily used and very affordable in today's home kitchens, an immersion circulator is something that will allow you to control a water bath to a very specific temperature, so you never overcook or you never undercook your product. I use this setup on a bi-weekly basis because it's a set it and forget it and super easy, and you get perfect results every time. Back in the day when these immersion circulators were 1,200 bucks, when they first hit the market, the premise of having a controlled time and temp was something that I was playing around with. So I've always adjusted the thermostat on my hot water heater at home to be 130 degrees out of the faucet. So I can essentially put a container underneath this water with it on as hot as it'll go, and I know that it's gonna trickle at 130 degrees, and you can drop your product and do sous vide cookery right here. 130 degrees is like mid-rare to medium steak, and 60 minutes, you have yourself like a hack sous vide setup. Sous vide means under pressure. We're not necessarily gonna vacuum the Ziploc bags that the product's in, but I'll show you a trick how to get the air out of them. The premise here is you want this controlled temperature, this water, to have contact with your product. So as you put your bag into the water, you wanna get all the air out of it, so this heat can be conducted into your product. Yeah, okay, time to sear. All right, we have a little bit of grapeseed oil in the pan, something that's neutral and will allow for a high temperature. You're gonna do your cooking in the sous vide environment. This sear in this pan should be quick, and it should allow for caramelization to occur on the outside. That'll then in turn flavor as it cooks on sous vide. Skin side down, this is where the hatch marks and the light seasoning is. Add your product slowly, but move it often. We're gonna get a sear on that half, and we're not gonna sear this half, and then we can compare the results after they come out of the sous vide cooker. The more you can get your hands into your product and look at it, the better. This isn't hot, you can touch this, okay? We have caramelization occurring the heaviest here, GBD, lighter here. Check this move out. We're going into the corner. That area that was already caramelized goes on a spoon, so it's no longer touching the pan. And you have connectivity here where you need more caramelization. Also keep in mind that where your pan is located on your flame, that's where your hottest point's gonna be. You tilt it, you can get a little more oil, a little more connectivity down there. Okay, this is predominantly fat that was rendered out of that calf. So this is pork fat here. We're gonna do all 6 sides. Caramelization, that's what you're looking for. All right, we're still on high flame. Got 3 sides down. We're almost there on our caramelization. I'm gonna drop this pan heat all the way down. I'm gonna get some butter, thyme, garlic, rosemary, and we're gonna go into this pan once it cools down for about another 30 seconds, and we're gonna start basting. Thyme, rosemary, garlic, give it a little smash with the heel of your hand. These are aromatics. This is our butter. When we first added our shoulder, it was a very aggressive sizzle. And now that the pan's cooled down 45 seconds, we have this this soft action happening. If you add your butter to an extremely hot pan, you're gonna burn it. You don't want that. Let's baste these aromatics a little bit, the garlic and thyme. Let that flavor happen. Here's where you want to be. These herbs smell so delicious once you add them into this brown butter. Buerre noisette is brown butter, and arrosier is to re-wet with fat, which is the techniques that we're using here. This looks delicious, but it is very much still in a raw state. It needs to cook, so I would not recommend tasting it at this point. You still have to cook it sous vide. Now, this pan has tons of flavor in it. All this brown butter, the aromatics. You could load this right into your oven rather than putting it into a sous vide environment. So why go that step? You have dry heat happening in your oven. You have your moisture in your product, and you have this dry heat hitting the outside of your pork shoulder, drying it out. Versus in a sous vide environment, all that moisture, all that flavor is trapped into a very condensed space, and you have no moisture loss. So it's a preferable cooking method. But when I load it into a Ziploc bag, I'm gonna load all this buerre noisette and all the herbs and everything in with it. Boom. This is all it takes. So we have one seared and we have one raw. They're both raw. These are both raw. This one's seared, this one is not. I'm demonstrating this, so you have 2 options. This one's gonna get seared after it's cooked, and we have one that's seared prior to cooking. And as we re-therm, we're gonna re-sear this one that we already put some heat to. If you go right out of your pan with that hot buerre noisette into your bag, you're gonna melt a hole in it. That's why I put it on the plate for 1 minute to cool down for a second. Waste not, want not. All that goodness, everything gets scraped, nothing gets wasted. All right, we're gonna load our water bath. These work way better and can hold temp much easier if you have a lid for your container. If you don't have a lid, use a piece of plastic wrap to cover it. Okay, and we go. I'm gonna seal this bag up 90% of the way and leave about a 1-inch hole on either side, like so. Submerge it, and this warm water will push all the air out. Just make sure that the side with the hole in it is not submerged yet. Get that snuggled in there. Use a spoon if you have to, get all the air pushed out of it, like so. You have to make sure that your product is fully submerged underwater. If you are at that point, you're good to go. Just make sure your Ziplock's nice and tight. Go, baby, go. Walk away from it. Go do something productive for 2 hours. Read a book. I would recommend Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan if you haven't read it. All right, out of the immersion circulator, one's seared, one is not seared. This could have been cooked 4 days ago and held in your refrigerator, and now it's time to re-therm it. No problem. I'm gonna re-therm in a hot pan. You wanna dry them off a little bit. Get them out of this liquid, out of the bag. This is all rendered goodness. I want to get this in a pan. This is gonna be my pan sauce. What's left here? That's delicious, don't waste that. You want to essentially use the same technique that we used to get it into the pan prior and sear it. We're just doing this after the math of cookery. I prefer to sear before bagging because you're adding caramelized goodness and flavor into that cooking environment. Whereas if you go straight in raw, then you don't. But some people prefer this technique. Another reason I don't like this so much is when your protein is cooked, it's contracted and tight. And when it's raw, it's soft. So when you put it in a pan, it'll relax and lay flat, and you can get a better sear on it a little more easily. But with us being able to arrosier and get some fat back on top of it, it's all right. Again, with high heat, you just want to caramelize the outside of it. We went through the trouble of cooking it in a controlled water bath so that you have nice texture all the way side to side. So if you take your time in a pan, you're gonna have a Maillard reaction and it's gonna overcook, which is a topic for another day. Like I said, this it's not gonna lay as flat, so you're gonna want to tip your pan so that the oil surrounds it. Takes on color quickly. Almost impossible to sear all sides of this, so I'm just gonna add a little butter and arrosé. That'll help with caramelization. You can also take this fat right on top, and it's like that sizzling effect. That'll help add color to it as well. You can let your spoon get hot in the oil. You touch it to the fat, that'll help sear it. Definitely easier to do it before the fat though, but if you press for time for some reason, just know that you can throw it into a bag and go. Let's add some butter. Arrosé, get a little brown butter going on in here, 50% heat. Allow that butter to foam, get roasty toasty. I'm out of garlic and thyme because I used it on the vegetables, but that would be a nice addition at this point. All right, re-therm's done. I'm gonna go ahead and make a pan sauce here. The amount of fat that's in the pan, it's a little high. I want a little bit of fat, not that much though. Pan sauce. So once we plate up, got your starch veg, we're gonna slice the pork shoulder, put that on top. Gotta have pan sauce to go on top of your product. So I could have a cornstarch slurry, which is about the consistency of heavy cream or glue. You add water to cornstarch, that makes a slurry that you can then thicken a sauce with. But I want to intensify this flavor, so by allowing this to evaporate, all this steam coming off the top of the pan, leaving, that's intensifying the flavor of the liquid that's remaining. I could use Montreal beurre, which is a butter and flour mixture, equal parts, that you roll into balls. Toss a couple of those in there, but if you don't have the time to cook it out, that's not a good technique. Or a whitewash, which is flour and water, arrowroot and water. There's a ton of hydrocolloids that you can thicken sauces with, but why dirty more dishes? This is a one-pan wonder, so we're making our pan sauce by evaporating it. You can tell that it's thickening by the size of the bubbles. There's obviously more heat here and here versus the middle because it's not bubbling as vigorously. So you have more rapid evaporation on the outside, so you want to move your pan around a little bit for even cookery. I'm dropping the heat down. We're just gonna let this coast. If your pan's getting away from you and you're panicking, turn the heat down. It's a non-stop up, down, on, off with these controls when you're cooking. So in order to slow this down, I'm gonna let this coast for a little bit. Turn the heat down to low, just let it go slow. And then as you become more comfortable cooking, time kind of slows itself down and you can multitask and you keep piling on different things. So pork loin, here we go. It's completely moist, it's perfectly cooked, it's deliciously seasoned because of that brine that we had it in for the last 16 hours. By using the sous vide technique, it's just bulletproof. Like, it went 1 hour and 30 minutes at 138.5 degrees, perfect. All right, plate up time. So this section is probably 10 ounces. And this would easily feed 3 people. I would have a portion of something like this, 4 ounces, and eat more vegetables. But it's your pork loin. You can do as you see fit. I'm very light on my right hand when I'm holding this knife. I'm not smashing through it, I'm cutting through it. I'm allowing the knife to do all the work. This is just gorgeous, all the way down to the end. Perfectly cooked, all the way through. Can't wait to get the pan sauce on it. Viscosity, thickness, that's pan sauce. I'm gonna hit this with lemon zest, lemon juice, a little bit of butter, taste it. This should be so unctuous, it'll coat the palate. It has that meaty pork deliciousness to it, but you need that snap of the acid, the salt, that balance. Your sauce, it really is the feng shui that brings the plate together. I like plating things in 3s. I want the green garlic and ramps on top of the potatoes. Give me a handsome fella here. Let's turn up. Sauce. Fresh chives, I just ran out my back door. Always keep your herbs close to your back door. Level 1 permaculture design. Herbs always go in last. They stay fresh, they don't take a lot of heat, don't cook your herbs. That'll do. Thanks again for joining me in my home. I hope you enjoyed watching the demo as much as I enjoyed doing it. Practice cooking, be happy, be healthy, support local, eat local. We have a ton of pork products available fresh from our farm, tons of vegetables that are coming on right now. Check us out at epiphanyfarms.com. Menu in the top right hand corner, it's got the shop tab. You can see all of our products that we offer. Take care of yourself, stay healthy. Thanks again.